All right, I think we can get started. Things are slowing down and the stragglers can come in through the intro here. Um, my name is Ross Adams. I'm hosting the meeting today on Teams here. Should you have any connectivity issues or get kicked out of the meeting or anything, please drop me a line at ross.adams@gov.ab.ca. Just a quick couple rules of engagement here, just in the interest of the presentation running smoothly. We ask that everyone turn their camera off and mute their microphone. And if you have any questions, there will be some time at the end to present them. So instead of people using their mics, please just put any questions in the chat box and I'll read them out for Renny and we'll make sure your question gets addressed. And apart from that, I will hand it over to Diana Boxmuff to introduce Renny.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. This is our second webinar of the winter. We are the Grassland Restoration Forum, and the GRF's mission is to provide a forum for information sharing, tool development, research, and education to promote and support conservation and effective restoration of native grassland ecosystems in Alberta. So to help support those goals, we offer quite a few courses. So there are these winter webinars. So this is our second one. We've got two more upcoming. There's one March 31st with Sean Aslin, and then April 24th with Dr. Carol Frost. We also have upcoming on March 20th in Cochrane, the classroom portion of the Range Health Assessment course, and that is the Range Plant Community Manuals, how to use them guideline. So it's a really nice, it's the classroom portion of the field course that we offer in September. I know September is still field season, so it's hard for people to get away for 2 days. So this is a really good opportunity to take advantage of there still being snow on the ground and really just hone your skills in time for field season. So it is a really wonderful course that really helps you understand how the communities fit together. It can be applied to anyone who's working in native grassland. So really great for if you're doing native grassland DSAs, pre-disturbance assessments, preparing seed mixes, or even doing like any other type of assessment in grasslands. These are the skills that you need to put it all together. So it's a really great course. You can always take it in March and then come back to Brooks in September and take the field portion, or maybe you want to take both days in September because you got to use it all summer and you have questions. It's a really great course. So highly recommend it for anyone of all experience levels. Definitely useful. So you can check our website. It's grasslandrestorationforum.ca, and it's there under events. That's March 20th in Cochrane. We will also be at the Saskatchewan Native Prairie Restoration Workshop. That is next week. So if anyone's heading out there, look for us. We'll have a booth and we'll have our swag there. And then we'll also be at CLRA in March, also with a booth and our swag. Okay, so I'll just get right on to Renny. Ross, let you know everything you need to know. So make sure, please leave your mics and cameras off. And if you have questions, post them in chat. You can post them at any time, and we will try to get through as many as we can before we get kicked off. So, not to leave you waiting anymore, we have Renny Grilz with us today. Renny is a man of diverse experience, all the way from academia and NCC. He's also a co-owner of Blazing Star Wildflower Seed Company, resource manager with the Meewasin Valley Authority, and he's a 2024 Nuffield Canada Scholar. As a Nuffield Scholar, Renny's research focuses on developing native seed networks and seed-based strategies to support prairie restoration and conservation in Western Canada. Renny is dedicated to advancing seed banking initiatives, native seed industry growth, and fostering partnerships to enhance biodiversity. Take it away, Renny.
Thanks, Diana. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to speak for to the Grassland Restoration Forum and to everyone that's joining us today. I'm coming from lovely, cold, snowy Saskatoon here, and I'm going to talk today about a project that I've been working on for Well, actually, the concept was about 10 years ago, looking at a native seed bank. And I'm going to talk about the process, what a native seed bank is, sort of the process of what we're looking at for creating one for Western Canada, and how this ties into my Nuffield Agriculture Scholarship. For those of you that are familiar with Saskatoon, there's an organization here called the Meewasin Valley Authority. And we were created in 1979 through a vision of conserving the South Saskatchewan River Valley. And as part of this creation, we developed, there was a landscape architect from Toronto created a 100-year plan for the valley called the Meewasin Valley Project. And what he looked at is conserving this river valley through the city of Saskatoon and the surrounding area to provide a he termed it actually in his report as a cathedral for conservation and for beauty. And as a landscape architect, it was actually one of his most proud projects. And he's worked on various projects throughout the world, including the War Museum in Ottawa. But this sort of set the stage for us for the creation of the Meewasin Valley Authority. And as part of the creation, there was an act created through the provincial legislation to conserve and protect the South Saskatchewan River Valley. And within that, 3 different agencies' lands were incorporated into the organization. So it was the provincial crown lands owned by the city of Saskatoon and the University of Saskatchewan. And within that, they actually make up our board of governors and representation. So we actually have the mayor and 3 city councillors. We have the president of the University of Saskatchewan and various professors, including our current chair is the Dean of Agriculture. And then the Saskatchewan government includes typically an MLA and different appointees. And so we are actually, as an organization, we are born of a partnership. And that's really what our focus has been for the last 45 years is partnership and conservation. And it leads to a lot of the initiatives, interesting initiatives that we work on here at Meewasin. And our mandate is a 3-prong approach. First objective is the conservation of the South Saskatchewan River Valley, provide education and awareness opportunities to the public about the importance of this river valley. And then we have a development approach as well. And within development, it's sort of 2 prongs. One is if you've ever been to Saskatoon, or you've been along the lovely Meewasin Valley trails along the river valley here in Saskatoon, that's one of our development opportunities is provide access to that river valley, but also we control development within the river valley as well. And so we actually have legislative authority on what goes on within the river valley in terms of development. Our jurisdiction is 6,700 hectares of land and within and outside the city limits. And we cover about 90 kilometers of river valley. And within our jurisdiction, we have several large tracts of native grassland within the city limits that we manage and then on the periphery of the city as well. And so my job and the work that I do with my team within resource management Meewasin is we look after the restoration and the work to keep this valley healthy. And so we have a really large restoration program. We have our actually own native plant greenhouse, and we do a lot of on-the-ground restoration work and also projects like targeted grazing and prescribed fire. So it's a really interesting organization, and as a mandate and as what we're responsible for. So the idea of a seed bank came about in 2017 when we published our Meewasin Valley-wide resource management plan. In 2015, we started working with numerous partners, and mainly we partnered with the Nature Conservancy of Canada, but we also we had numerous stakeholders at the table. And as we were talking about our conservation targets of what we're trying to enhance and manage within this river valley, restoration kept coming to the forefront. And as part of this restoration, we were talking about seed. Where do we get the seed from? How do we store the seed? How do we expand the amount of seed available for restoration? As part of that discussions, the concept of a local seed bank popped up by many of the stakeholders, that we need a place to as a repository for our native seeds here in the Saskatoon region, to to keep that unique genetic diversity that we have within the region. And so it was one of the actions that we identified within our the conservation strategy under the resource management plan. But the plan developed 120 different actions, right? So it's one of many actions that we've identified. But the concept of the seed bank was born within this strategy. So what is a native plant seed bank? So a seed bank is the ex situ conservation of seeds to preserve that genetic diversity. And typically it could be storing your seed in a tin can in your basement, of your garden seeds, to probably the most famous seed bank in the world is Svalbard Global Seed Vault up in Norway, up in the Arctic. And that's sort of our doomsday seed bank for global diversity. And so, the seed bank could be really wide ranging, but really what it involves is collecting, cleaning, drying, and storing these seeds at low temperatures for medium, short term to long term. So, depending on what your objectives of the seed bank is, depends on how long you want to preserve those seeds. Worldwide, there's 1,700 seed banks around the world. Mainly focused on crops and wild crop relatives, but there's about 400 of them around the world that actually contain native plant germplasm as well. And so seed banks can be used to help preserve that genetic diversity as we're losing that habitat loss of species. As we see climate change and shift of species and loss of those species. Invasive species moving into certain areas. So, for example, if you look at Eastern Canada with butternut and what's happening to those populations, steep decline due to disease. Catastrophic events such as storms, and then also worldwide when you think of some of these global conflicts that are occurring. And so the seed banks help preserve those genetics for the long term. And worldwide, 2 out of 5 of the world's plant species are at risk of extinction, right? So it's becoming increasingly important to preserve some of this genetic diversity. Typically there's 3 main types of seed banks. And so, the one type of seed bank is one that's just, you collect your seed, you save your seed, and you plant it out. So it could be your garden seeds, it could be your crops. That's, one of the, a simple seed bank type. The second one, the more of the production focused, productive is focused, is looking at ways of storing those seeds to help and have them available for new crop development in the future. And so you take those seeds and then you plant them out and you use them for crop development. And then your preservationists, where you're looking at preserving those seeds for the long term and safeguarding them from destruction. Globally, in 2012 or 2022, at the COP15 conference in Montreal, Canada and the world signed on the Global Biodiversity Framework. And within that framework, there were 23 targets. Target 2 looked at restoration, and that had a worldwide goal of restoring 30% of our degraded habitats by 2030. And so, with a target of that worldwide, there's a lot of need for seed to do this restoration work. But also, Target 4 talked about maintaining and restoring the genetic diversity of plants and wild species, and actually talked about the ex situ conservation of seed of species as well as a target. So as part of working on our looking at our delivering our conservation actions within our resource management plan, we identified, this seed bank project as a potential project that or something that we want to look at here in the Saskatoon region. And so we worked with EDI consultants here in Saskatoon on looking at a needs assessment, and to determine, is actually a seed bank something that we should be looking at? Is there a need for this in the Saskatoon region and also within Western Canada? And they did a great job at um, pulling the resources on what a seed bank is, what's needed for seed banking, what are some of the key seed banks that we should have discussions with, but also they surveyed many individuals, groups, and agencies to determine what are the needs of a seed bank and if it's actually feasible. And so within those surveys, really the astonishing response was that yes, in Western Canada, there's no seed banking opportunities for native plant material. There's definitely a need for this from a researcher perspective, from an agricultural producer perspective, restoration perspective, seed producer perspective, a gardener's perspective. And so everyone was really excited that there was a need for this. And so came out of this strategy was sort of three key recommendations. One was to develop a strategic plan for this project. Start, looking at developing international seed bank standards and training opportunities, and then building a network and partnerships within the seed banking, for seed banking here in Western Canada. And I would like to acknowledge the Meewasin Family Foundation for their generous support. They provided us with a small grant to do this feasibility needs assessment, and really appreciate their vision, their support to look at this. So we created this report. It was published at the end of December of 2022. And then we started thinking, okay, we need to start looking at this strategic plan. But, where do you start? And in my mind, thinking of a seed bank, I know a little bit about seed banking. I've done some reading on seed banking, but I didn't really know where to start as a project. Like, how can we make this work in Saskatoon or within the prairies? Here in Saskatoon, we're very fortunate. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has the Plant Gene Resources of Canada, which is actually Canada's seed bank for crops here in Canada. Canada has three different seed banks, one for crops, one for forest, Canada has three national seed banks ran through the federal government, one on crops, one on tree seeds, and the other one on species like potatoes and other species like that. And so we're very fortunate here in Saskatoon to have the Plant Gene Resources of Canada. So this is a picture from this past December. Myself, I'm standing right beside Axel, who's the director of the Plant Gene Resources of Canada, and across from me is one of his technicians, Tina. And I've been to this seed bank several times on tours historically over the years, and I knew the big large freezers that they have and the big seed packages that they have, and I'm thinking, okay, this is what a seed bank is. Is this something that we could do in Saskatoon just on the plant species? A big freezer we can walk in and freeze seed. Working with Axel or talking with Axel over the years, knowing that they're at full capacity right now within their freezer space, and that they have no capacity for any native plant material. They're interested in it, but they just have no capacity for it. And so how can we advance this project, knowing that we have this resource here in Saskatoon, but they have no capacity? I had the opportunity to attend a tree seed workshop in Smoky Lake, Alberta, at the Alberta Tree Seed Improvement Center back in spring, or actually it would have been March of 2023. And with Lindsay Ross and several other people that are actually on the call today. And it was a really great workshop, learning about seeds, how proper seed storage, and all those aspects. And if you've never been up to Smoky Lake, I highly recommend going there and visiting their facility. They actually have their seed bank is actually or it was developed in the 1970s, and it's a concrete bunker buried underground with like 2 feet of cement, and with large freezers in it. And so really that 1970s, early 1980s concept of seed banking, where you want to prevent nuclear bomb blasts and bombs and war kind of thing. And but it was in my mind, I'm going, okay, this is another option for seed banking. But something that we can maybe build on the river valley, a nice bunker right on the riverbank along the river. But is this something that we would want here in Saskatoon? And so it was sort of one of those other concepts that we sort of formulated as we're thinking about the project. I had the opportunity at a conference at the Society for Ecological Restoration conference in Quebec City to attend a workshop hosted by the people at the National Tree Seed Center from Fredericton. And they run the seed bank for tree seeds for Canada as part of the Canadian Forest Service. And I got to meet Mary Lockwood, Donnie McPhee, which presented a couple of years ago at the Grassland Restoration Forum conference, and then the late Melissa Sperling, and had some great discussions with them on the potential of the seed bank in Saskatoon and what that could look like, and what are the partnership potentials as well with their programming. And so they have a really interesting program. They're focusing specifically on tree species. Originally, they were focusing on the forest industry focused species, but they've been really pushing towards more of that diversity of species from across our forests across Canada, and including tree and shrub species. And their goal is to get representation of every species from every eco-district in our forested communities across Canada. And so really ambitious goals. One of the programs that they created, though, that's really fascinating is their Indigenous Seed Collection Program. And if you Google the Indigenous Seed Collection Program and Donnie McPhee, you'll find a lot of interesting stories and articles, newspaper articles from his project, traveling across Canada with his camper, meeting with First Nations communities and local communities on tree seed collection program, and working with communities on harvesting seed to add seed into seed bank projects, but also to use that seed locally for forestry and restoration projects. And so it was a really fascinating discussions I've had with them over the years on different meetings. I've ran into them, and as another thing to think about with a seed bank project here in Saskatoon. So you look at these three amazing programs, and then going, okay, how do we fit that into Saskatoon? I had an opportunity to apply for a Nuffield Canada Agriculture Scholarship after that Society of Ecological Restoration Conference in Quebec City in June of 2023. And within that scholarship, I applied for looking at the native seed industry here for Western Canada to try and grow the native seed industry to meet these large restoration goals, and how can native seed producers start working together. As one aspect of my proposal. The second aspect of my proposal was looking at seed banking as well, because if you're harvesting seed and trying to grow native seed industry and you're doing wild type seed collections to increase seed, there's also a potential to add that seed into a seed bank. And so I tied the two projects together, and I was the successful recipient of the scholarship. And Nuffield is agriculture scholarships are an international scholarship with people from around the world that go and investigate specific agricultural questions. And so within my year of 2024, there's 100 of us from 16 different countries and 6 different continents studying everything that you can imagine. Black soldier fly larvae farmer from downtown London to a tulip farmer from Tasmania. To an agricultural, one of my colleagues from Southern Ontario is an egg farm reporter, but he's actually looking at shelter belts and habitat enhancements on croplands. So it's a real diverse group of producers from around the world. And what it is, it's an opportunity to also connect with these producers and also the alumni to learn from each other. But also the scholarship gives you funding to travel to around the world to go and meet with people within your industry to learn from them and then bring back that information back to your home country, to your home province, and share that to help improve your sector. And so I was a lucky recipient of that. And I had the opportunity to travel this last summer of 2024. I spent 6 weeks in Europe meeting with native seed producers and taking that information from them and also looking at restoration projects and seed banking projects and bring that information back to try and be helpful and help the industry here in Canada. So as soon as I got to England, one of my first stops was actually, I figured if I'm going to study seed banking, I might as well look at the best. And so the Q Millennium Seed Bank is probably the largest seed bank in the world. And it is probably the sort of the gold standard for seed banking. They actually, within their repository, they have 2.4 billion seeds from 40,000 different species. And their goal is to have representation of the world's biodiversity stored in their seed bank. Their facilities are world class with full research function. They actually have dormitories for visiting researchers. It's flood proof, bomb proof, radiation proof, and a very fascinating facility. I met with their Americas program director, who is doing work across the Americas, mainly focusing on South America, but was definitely interested in looking at opportunities to work with us with our project here in Western Canada, and interested in actually being share resources and knowledge on seed collecting protocols, seed storage protocols, and but also long-term storage of our of seeds in their facility. I had a chance to go down into their underground facilities. The above ground facilities are where they do the research, or they do the seed cleaning and the seed testing, and are actually designed for the public to watch them work. And then their storage facilities are underground, and I had a chance to go visit those underground facilities. Also, as part of their visit or their site, they also have part of a botanical gardens where they represent, some of the diversity of the world in those botanical gardens. I made a trip over to Ireland, and I got to meet with a gentleman by the name of Sandro. And I would have to say Sandro is probably the most eccentric person I have ever met in the wildflower seed industry, and eccentric in the most loving way. He is so passionate and dedicated to being a native seed producer in Ireland. And just a fascinating gentleman, and I got a chance to spend 2 days with him. And he views himself as actually a living seed bank. And so some of the work that he does is he works with the Irish government, and he goes in and collects some of these rare and endangered species from, tops of the Irish mountains and the Irish coast, grows them and works with gardeners to increase the seed so that it helps preserve those species. And those species are then used for restoration projects. And so his view is that, seeds being stored in a freezer, have no value. You're just, the seeds just go there to sort of die, is in his perspective. And so, they're living beings, and so you want to keep them growing and keep them alive. And so, that concept was something that resonated as part of my travels, and something that I brought back as we continued our discussions for seed banking. I wasn't able to meet with True Harvest Seeds in Northern Ireland. I had arranged to go meet with them, and something happened. We couldn't meet. But they're actually a native seed company in Northern Ireland, not too far from Belfast. And one of the things that they're working on is a fundraising. It's a nonprofit organization that does native seeds. And they're actually working on their own seed bank to preserve Northern Ireland's native species. And so they're in the middle of a fundraising campaign right now to create their own seed vault. And they have, and so really interesting that, very like myself with Meewasin, a nonprofit organization looking at pursuing this. And I've had a couple of conversations with them since, and it's a really interesting project that they're working on. And some of their concepts was something that I brought also back as we continued our discussions on seed banking. Um, as I traveled, continuing my travels through Europe, I ended up in Germany, and I met with Dr. Sabine Zackel with the University of Osnabrück, and she's the curator of the botanical gardens at Osnabrück University, and also looks after the seed bank. And so this is a small seed bank. It was started in 2003, and then they expanded the program in 2009. And they worked with actually 4 different botanical gardens in Germany to create, to have these different seed banks throughout Germany. And so now they have 3,600 German species in their seed bank. And so, coming from, knowing Saskatoon seed banking program and the Alberta Tree Seed Center's, bunker, and then what they're doing in at the National Tree Seed Center. And after just visiting the queue, I go visit her seed bank, and her seed bank is just 4 or 3 small walk-in coolers, one set at plus 4 degrees Celsius and 2 at minus 20. Very simple seed banks, just run-of-your-mill freezers that you could buy almost commercially, and a very simple program. And I'm going, okay, this is, start resonating. Okay, this is something that we could maybe look at that would fits within our program within Saskatoon. As talking with her, we did this. Also, this site is also on the botanical gardens as well. So, there's a lot of education awareness as well that they run through their programming. But one of the things that they've developed is sort of a process on identifying how do you select the species to put into a seed bank, and because there's a lot of uncertainty with that, and like how do you prioritize? And so that the photo there is the poster in German. Oh, sorry, I had translated that through Google Translate. But what it is how they broke down the 4,000 species in German of wild species to help prioritize down to where do they start first for collecting. And so as part of our seed banking project here, before I left on my trip to Europe, we started pulling together a technical advisory committee for a strategic plan. And I'd asked the group, how do we prioritize what species? Is it culturally significant species? Is it those species that are of agronomic importance? Are they species that are used in restoration that everyone's using? Is it species that are rare and endangered? And collectively, we couldn't come up with an answer. And so Dr. Sabine has, this is an example of the process that they went through to help select their priorities to get the first round of species into their seed bank. So some very valuable insight on how to do some planning. When I went to Estonia for the Society for Ecological Restoration conference at the end of August, the first day I went on a tour, and the person I sit beside is actually the curator of the seed bank of the Belgium seed bank in Brussels, Cedrine Godefroid, and yeah, so it was very interesting just just sit beside her. It was a conference with 600 people, and this is the person I sit beside. And it's the only seed bank in Belgium, and but they also run the 15th largest herbarium in the world with 4 million species. And so their goal is to eventually get 3 accessions, so three representations of every species in um, Belgium is their goal. And so she's, but, very slim budgets. She's the curator responsible for a whole bunch of different projects, and she has like 1 or 2 technicians. So a lot of difficult work. So one of the things that she's been doing is using volunteers to collect seed, and found funding for a volunteer coordinator. And she found that having using volunteers for seed collection, and they train them, give them, areas where to go, and the amount of samples that they have in their seed bank went up exponentially. Whereas the German seed bank, what they were doing was, only a few staff, and they weren't finding that they weren't getting the seed collected that they needed. They went out to contractors to do seed collecting as well. And typically, some of the instructors from different universities during the summer months send them out for a month to go seed collecting. So another concept to bring back to develop seed bank concept here for the prairies. One of my stops when I was in Germany was to visit with Fred Eichmeyer, and he owns a company in the Bavaria part of Germany that actually he's a native plant breeder and finds projects for native plants on the commercial use. And so one of the species he's been working with is Russian dandelion for latex rubber. The Russian dandelion has a fairly high concentration of latex in its roots. You can see that third picture. That's a dried root where you break it and you stretch it, and it's actually the latex you can see in there. And so he's been selectively breeding Russian dandelion for the tire industry, for a project with the tire industry. The company that he's doing the project for has a goal of having 25% of their tires coming from natural, sustainable sources. And so he's been working on this project. And so where he got his seed and where he gets most of his seeds for his different projects is actually he works with seed banks from around the world to get the seed. And so his seed for this project actually came from St. Petersburg, Russia, which was actually one of the first seed bank, was actually the first seed bank in the world. And so, one of those interesting, stories of the value of seed banks and that preservation of that seed. One of the things too with Fred was doing is a project on a specific medicinal plant species, or sorry, it's a species that's being used for crops. I think it was lucerne that he's working on, and it was selective for low toxicity, but only from like 3 or 4 different plants. And so he went back to old seed bank samples from almost 100 years pre-crop selection and went back to some of these wild type relatives, and then was able to look at different ascensions and differences in varieties. So showing that research application that these seed banks can provide. And then one of the things too, as part of my stops, I would always try and visit some of the botanical gardens when I was in any of the major cities. And when I was at the SCR conference in Tartu, I visited the botanical gardens there. And they have a beautiful botanical garden, and they actually did a large area of native species to Estonia, looking at the different eco-regions or eco-districts of Estonia and having those representative plants. What I really found fascinating was almost a quarter of the plants were actually species that are native to Saskatchewan and Alberta's boreal forest because they're circumpolar species, circumboreal species, and it was very fascinating to see species from home growing in Estonia. But they've done a great job in representing those communities, and another concept to bring back to our seed bank project here in Canada. Then, but I'm still thinking, how can we make this work, right? Because there's, these are, you still have to have bricks and mortar. You have to have a facility. How can you make this work? I attended the SCR conference in the North American conference in Vancouver at the end of October, beginning of November. And I ran into a lady named Joe Wagner, and she's actually works with the seed banking projects in the Hawaiian Islands. And each island in Hawaii has their own seed bank. And they also do seed banking for farmers as well, where they do storage of seed for farmers, and as that's tied into the work that they do. So it was really interesting conversations with her and some of the work that she's doing, and and being able to store seed within their seed bank for those farmers in a small area. And but one of the things that the projects that she works on is she and her team have developed an off-grid portable seed bank. So taking a sea can, a 40-foot sea can, and putting a 20-foot freezer in the back and 20 feet of lab space in the front, make it off the grid, solar powered with air conditioners and everything, and they can ship, and they've been shipping them around the world. And so the intention of this is to help some of these different countries or these different regions start their seed banking projects with a simple solution, instead of having to build bricks and mortar, to build this total off the grid, system of a sea can. And so the one she told me about was they shipped one to Kenya for $140,000 US, right? And so so I'm going, oh, okay, this is another concept that we could apply here within our project. So when I came back from all these travels, reconvened our steering committee for the seed bank project, and we worked with EDI consultants to sort of take this next stage to do this strategic plan, and we had just finalized this plan in the last week. And we developed a vision and sort of a 15-year, a long-term strategic plan for this project, and looking at how we can use this seed bank, how we can create a seed bank that meets local and regional and prairie-wide needs, from seed producers to conservation groups to First Nations communities to researchers to seed producers to restoration practitioners, and a very exciting project. Within this, we identified sort of 3 phases. The first phase is to establish that seed bank, sort of spark that idea, get things rolling. The second phase is expand and build on to the initial successes, and then the third phase is that long-term maintenance of this, to shepherd this along to make sure this project continues. So the first phase is could start today, is getting people excited about this project and securing the initial startup funding, and getting key people, key partnerships in place to get this rolling. And what always struggled in the back of my mind is, okay, and as we're talking through this, the steering committee is, okay, we need to do bricks and mortar, and we got to get a building in place. Well, that could take 5-10 years to get the funding. But the concept of this portable facility, that really resonated with everyone, and we thought, okay, relatively cheap investment, we can get off the ground and start the process, right? Get staffing in place to start doing protocol developments, start that database creation, partnership development as well, working with key partners, whether it's seed producers, researchers, conservation groups, landowners, to start collecting seed and providing it into the seed bank, but also providing those training opportunities as well to learn about seed banking. And then begin that initial planning for that future bricks and mortar site. Start ramping up seed collections regionally, and then putting together strategies to secure funding for that medium term and that capital funding that would be required for this project. So then the second phase would be the expand phase, right? And so this is, this is where you get to that facility is built. And, you pre-plan what this facility would look like, build the facility, build those botanical demonstration gardens to engage the public and to show the value of what our what our plant species have here in the Western Canada. Build partnerships with national seed banks for medium to long-term storage, but also the international seed banks as well. Develop those strategic partnerships. Also work with regional seed banking networks, not just within the prairies here, but maybe we can use this as a way to spur on the concept of seed bank in other parts of Canada, whether it's Southern Ontario, interior British Columbia, up in the Arctic, and use this as a way to spur on these regional seed banking opportunities. Do it in one place and train and teach others, and then they can do it in their areas as well, and then secure that long-term funding. We don't have funding in place. This is just the original strategic plan. And so now we're going to be going forward and trying to find funders to try and kick off this idea and see if we can make it work. So why would we want to do something like this in Saskatoon? So what's interesting with Saskatoon, there's a lot of great resources right here within Saskatoon. We have the University of Saskatchewan with the College of Agriculture and Bioresources. So we have a whole, team of researchers that are doing restoration projects. We have plant breeders and forage breeders right at the university. We have the W.P. Fraser Herbarium, which is one of the largest herbariums in Western Canada, housed right here on the university campus. And one of the things with seed collecting for seed banking is you'd want to have a voucher specimen to confirm what species you have collected for. And so that strong relationship with a herbarium is very important for this. And then also other colleges on campus as well. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, the Plant Gene Resources of Canada facility here on campus. We have those technical experts right here within our city, and so work with them and partner with them on these standards and practices. They're hoping to expand their their capacity as well in the next few years, and so there might be an opportunity to work with them as this facility is the short, medium-term storage, and then they could be the long-term storage as part of that. Also, Meewasin as an organization was tapped in 2021 by Parks Canada to investigate looking at creating a national urban park in Saskatoon. So at that, the government of Canada in 2020 now announced the concept of looking at these national urban parks to bring people into urban areas to experience nature, not being like a standard Parks Canada park like Jasper or Banff or Prince Albert National Park, but more of these urban or an urban model. So an example would be the Rouge National Park in National Urban Park in Toronto would be similar concept as what we're looking at with this project. And so what we're thinking is as we continue investigating and potential development of a national urban park here in Saskatoon with Meewasin leading this project, this could be a real hub of this expertise that could be used for other national urban parks across the country and incorporate that into their national park system or the national urban park system and train those national urban parks on seed banking as well. So, Saskatoon is a really interesting hub for something like this. Also, we're sort of in the center of the three prairie provinces, sort of, kind of. And so that gives us an opportunity to work with Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta people as well on a project like this. So, as part of my Nuffield travels, one of the things that's encouraged by Nuffield is to share information and experiences from your travels across the world. And so, one of the outcomes of the project is I have to have a report prepared at the end of 2025 to present to Nuffield Canada about my findings of my project. However, there's a lot of encouragement to speak for various groups like today, Grassland Restoration Forum, and other groups as well, to share that information with others to help spark and excite new ideas. I did a webinar for Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan back in November. If you go on their website, you can go to that. You can see the recording of that. And I talk about the stories of all the different seed producers I met with and some of those key little stories that I learned meeting with them. So if you're interested in that, go to the PCAP website and you can see those stories. Also, if you're going to the Native Prairie Restoration Workshop next week, I'm going to be doing 2 talks as well, sharing some stories on some of the restoration efforts that I saw when I was in Europe and some of these unique things that might be something that we could try here in North America as well, or in Western Canada as well. I'd like to thank my sponsors for my Nuffield Canada Scholarship and specifically Nature Conservancy of Canada, who is my primary sponsor, and their very generous support in sponsoring Nuffield Canada and myself. I'd also like to thank Sask Parks, my Meewasin Valley Authority, Blazing Star Wildflower Seed, which is actually my family business. Also Brett Young Seeds for their wonderful support on this project. Also, the Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan, Skinner Native Seeds, the Saskatchewan Environmental Society's Ann Coxworth Fund, Alkla Native Plants from Alberta, and KT Honey. And also National Native Seed Conference in Arizona, which is in 2 weeks or 3 weeks for their, they provide me with a small scholarship to attend the conference in a few weeks. Also, I have quite a few groups here in Saskatchewan that are supporting me with in-kind, helping share my story to various people and to the public. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today. And, I'm going to be continuing my travels, my Nuffield travels this spring and summer, heading off into Arizona in a couple of weeks for the National Native Seed Conference. Also have visits planned for Eastern Canada and also Western Canada and the United States to meet with seed producers this spring and summer as well. So if you're interested in following my travels, I'm doing some social media as well to get that information out as well. So with that, I think we can probably open it up for questions.
Thanks, Renny. That was awesome. Really fascinating project you're working on there. Got one question so far, and just throw your questions in the chat box there, folks. But to start us off, is there a procedure for replacing and growing out these stored seed resources as needed?
Yeah, yes, there is. And each seed bank develops their own resources and protocols for that. And so specifically in the crop world, they have really strong protocols and process for how often you take certain, wheat species, how often you plant it out, how do you separate it from other species, from, wind pollination, and then how do you store that back, and that isolation. And then in terms of native plants, though, it's maybe not as well defined processes, but there is information out there from some of the different seed banks around the world. And so, as we're developing this project, is to develop these protocols as well, right? So and people like the Q has all as I talk to all these seed banks from around the world, they're more than willing to share their knowledge and expertise to get this information to help us build those protocols for for this project.
Thanks, Renny. That's the only one so far. Oh, another one here. Is there a distance from the source, i.e. Saskatoon, that you would collect from to determine local genetics?
Yes, that's a really interesting question. and the concept of seed zones and, we really haven't focused on that from a native, from a grassland perspective here in Western Canada. One of the things in Germany, they had set up 22 different seed zones in Germany, where seed could only be taken within that seed zone, and grown within that seed zone and sold within that seed zone and planted in that seed zone. And, which is quite unique. We don't have that in Western Canada. Talking to seed producers, they find it a little frustrating because they think it should be maybe closer to 9. But that's what they're working with in Germany. Whereas other countries, I think Belgium is broken up in 4 seed zones, when you think of that smaller country. In terms of like Saskatoon here, what's unique and also challenging with Saskatoon is if you look at the eco district map, we have 4 within my Meewasin Valley zone, conservation zone of the Meewasin Valley. I have 5 different eco districts that cross within my jurisdiction. I have 2 different eco-regions that cross within. And so, how do you determine how far you can move species before you have genetic drift issues, right? And that's something I think the bigger industry and the researchers, I think we have to have those discussions and see, how does that fit, right? You look at some of the work that they're doing in the United States on seed zones, Eastern United States, it's sort of every 10 degrees latitude is sort of a seed zone or something like that. But then you go into Western United States, it's more based on geography, right? And elevation. And so I think it's something we need to definitely look at further here in Western Canada.
All right, maybe time for one more and then we'll wrap up here. Would a seed bank based in Saskatoon be able to serve Alberta, or do you envision a seed bank network across the prairies?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think yes to both. I think seed bank in Saskatoon could potentially, depends on how it's structured and built, could be sort of that national seed bank for prairies, right? Where everything is centered in there, but then have local seed banking efforts out there to collect locally and protect, conserve locally as well, but then feeds up for that medium term to longer term storage in that central location. I think that's actually probably the best model is you have local initiatives that are doing seed banking and then sending that seed into that more of that central repository. And then that central repository then shares that into that broader network of seed banks. I think that concept is probably the most effective and efficient way of doing it and getting more of this interest of seed banking into these local areas. And so if you think of some of the work that, the Blood Tribe is doing in Southern Alberta, they're working on their own local seed banking initiative, for for a lot of their local, their local species. There could be an opportunity that maybe, this seed bank could be some of that long-term storage for their species. They can collect for their projects, but then, the sort of the backup, could be with this seed bank. One of the things with seed banking, the standard practice is you always have a backup collection, right? And the backup collection is stored somewhere else, right? Whether it's within Canada or, maybe another country in the world. So if you think of the global conflicts that are occurring in Ukraine or in Syria, those seed banks that were in Kiev and in Sierra, they were evacuated and taken out of country when those conflicts started. And so, having that backup in a different country, it can be actually quite important. So something to think about as we look at these initiatives locally and regionally.
Awesome. Thanks, Renny. Um, well, we're at time here, folks. There were a few more questions came in right at the wire there. So there's the contact info on the last slide here. So maybe reach out to Renny directly. Thank you so much for your time today, Renny. That was great. And just a few wrap-up things. This presentation has been recorded and will be posted on the Grassland Restoration Forum website, where you can also find many more resources for working in native grasslands. You can sign up for the newsletter, which will keep you up to date on all of our upcoming events. You can sign up for the Plant Community Guide training course on the 20th of March in Cochrane, and the next webinar will be on March 31st with Sean Aslan. Thanks for being here today, folks, and everybody have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Ross.